It was meant to be a routine flight from Lagos, Nigeria to New York. But before takeoff, the captain's voice declared they were already descending. The sky outside burned copper, and on the ground below, a crowd of strangers stood perfectly still, calling each passenger by name. Days later, the date had jumped 3 years, and the first passenger was gone without a trace. Michael Carter hated airports. The lines, the noise, the stale smell of recycled air, it all made him restless. Yet here he was at Murtala Muhammad International Airport in Lagos, clutching his worn leather travel bag and checking his boarding pass for the 10th time. Flight 728 to New York was already 3 hours late. Passengers crowded the waiting area, some pacing, others sleeping awkwardly in their seats. Michael leaned back, eyes on the flickering departure board. He had covered war zones, riots, and natural disasters as a journalist, but nothing made him feel as uneasy as the chaos of a delayed flight. A sudden announcement crackled through the overhead speakers. Passengers on Flight 728, please proceed to Gate 14 for immediate boarding. People rushed forward. Michael joined the slow-moving line, glancing at the faces around him. A young woman in a denim jacket was humming softly, staring at the floor. A mother clutched her son's hand so tightly that his small fingers turned pale. A tall man in a navy suit kept checking his watch, muttering under his breath. At the front, an airport attendant scanned each ticket without making eye contact. She didn't smile, didn't speak, just waved people through. When Michael reached her, she paused, studying him with unsettling focus. "You've been expected," she said in a flat voice. Michael frowned. "What do you mean?" The attendant's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Safe travels, Mr. Carter." He stepped onto the jet bridge, the heavy scent of jet fuel filling his lungs. The air felt warmer. Here, almost humid, like stepping into a greenhouse. He glanced back once, but the attendant was gone. Inside the plane, the cabin lights flickered. The passengers settled in without the usual chatter. No one seemed to be searching for overhead bin space or swapping seats. It was as if everyone knew exactly where they were supposed to be. Michael slid into his seat by the window. Across the aisle sat Sarah Bennett, a slim woman, with tired eyes and a protective grip on the little boy beside her. The child stared out the window, his lips moving as if whispering to someone unseen. "Long trip ahead," Michael said, trying to break the silence. Sarah nodded but didn't look at him. "It'll be over before we know it." Something in her tone made him pause. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 728. We'll be departing shortly. Please remain seated." But there was no safety demonstration, no flight attendants walking the aisles. The engines hummed faintly, but the plane didn't move. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. No one complained. No one even asked what was happening. Michael's eyes grew heavy. Just for a moment he thought, closing them. When he opened them again, the cabin lights were bright, the hum louder. The captain's voice returned, calm, cheerful. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent. Please fasten your seatbelts. We'll be landing shortly." Michael blinked in confusion. Landing? They hadn't even taken off. Michael sat frozen in his seat, the words from the captain still ringing in his ears. "We have begun our descent." He glanced out the window. Clouds. Thick, endless clouds. No runways, no city lights, no sea. Just a vast, pale sky that seemed to have swallowed the world. Sarah leaned forward, pulling her son's seatbelt tighter. "Stay close to me, Daniel," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her eyes, sharp and unblinking, stayed fixed on the window. Michael tried to stand, but his body felt heavy, like gravity had doubled. "Excuse me," he called to a passing flight attendant. She stopped beside him. Her uniform was spotless, her hair pulled into a perfect bun, but her eyes were distant, glassy. "Yes, Mr. Carter? How are we landing? We didn't take off." The corners of her mouth lifted in a slow, unnatural smile. "You'll be safe soon." Michael's skin prickled. "That's not what I asked." But she moved away before he could say more, gliding down the aisle without looking back. A man in the row ahead twisted in his seat. He was tall, with close-cropped hair and a soldier's posture. "You noticed it too," he said. Michael nodded. "We were still at the gate. I closed my eyes for maybe a minute and now we're landing," the man finished. "Name's David. U.S. Air Force, retired. I've been on hundreds of flights. Nothing about this is right." The engines roared louder and the pressure in Michael's ears told him they really were descending. Passengers around them didn't seem disturbed. In fact, some smiled faintly, as though they'd been waiting for this moment all their lives. Through the window, shapes began to appear between the clouds. Not skyscrapers. Not mountains. Something else. Sarah's son pressed his small hand to the glass. "They're waving at us," he said softly. Michael followed his gaze, and his stomach dropped. Far below, on a strip of pale land, figures stood in perfect rows. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. From this height they looked like shadows cut into the earth, motionless, but unmistakably facing the sky. The captain's voice returned, smooth and steady. "Welcome home." Michael's heart pounded. Oh. The plane touched down with barely a bump. No reverse thrust, no screech of tires, just a strange, weightless glide. As the seatbelt sign blinked off, everyone rose in eerie unison. Everyone except Michael, Sarah, and David. "What the hell is going on?" Michael muttered. David's jaw tightened. "I don't know, but I'm not the first one off this plane." The cabin doors hissed open and warm, heavy air rushed inside. It smelled faintly sweet, almost like overripe fruit. Michael stood, hesitating in the aisle as the passengers filed out. With unnatural calm, no rushing for luggage, no chatter, just quiet obedience. David stayed close, his eyes scanning every detail. Sarah gripped her son's hand so tightly that the boy winced. They stepped into the jet bridge, though it wasn't like any Michael had seen before. The walls were smooth and pale, with no visible seams. Instead of the metallic hum of an airport, there was only silence, deep, unsettling silence. At the end, the tunnel opened into blinding daylight. Michael squinted, expecting to see the familiar chaos of JFK Airport. Instead, they emerged onto an open platform. Before them stretched a vast plain of pale earth under a sky the color of faded copper. In the distance, rows of people stood perfectly still, waiting. They were dressed in simple gray clothing, their faces expressionless. And yet, every pair of eyes locked directly on the passengers. A woman broke from the front of the line and walked toward them. She was tall, with sleek black hair and an ageless face. Her voice was clear and precise. "Welcome home, Michael Carter." Michael froze. "How do you know my name?" The woman's lips curved slightly, but it wasn't a smile. "We've been waiting for you." David stepped forward. "This isn't New York. Where are we?" She didn't answer him. Instead, she looked past him to Sarah. "And you?" "Sarah Bennett. You've done well to keep him safe." Sarah stiffened. "Keep who safe?" The woman's gaze dropped to the small boy. "Daniel. He is important here." Sarah pulled Daniel closer, her body tense. "You're not touching my son." The woman didn't move, but something in her eyes made Michael's skin crawl, like she knew every thought in his head. Around them, the other passengers began walking toward the waiting crowd, each greeted by name, each accepted without hesitation. "Come," the woman said softly. "It is time." Michael's instincts screamed at him to run. But there was nowhere to go, only the endless plane, the motionless crowd, and the strange plane they'd arrived in. David leaned close, his voice low. "We need to figure out where the hell we are, before they decide we're not supposed to be here." Behind them, the cabin doors closed. The plane's engines hummed, and then fell silent. Michael's pulse pounded in his ears as the three of them were guided away from the platform. The pale ground felt strange beneath his shoes, soft but firm, like walking on tightly packed sand. The crowd parted as they passed, dozens of eyes following their every move. Michael could feel it, not just curiosity but recognition, as though these people already knew every detail about him. They were led toward a wide, low building with no windows. Its walls shimmered faintly in the copper light, like they were made of metal that had never been touched by rust. Inside, the air was cooler. There were no chairs, no signs, no airport bustle. Just a smooth floor and a faint humming, as if something deep in the walls was alive. Michael slipped his phone from his pocket. No signal bars. No Wi-Fi. But the screen lit up. When he tapped it, and what he saw made his breath catch. August 11, 2028. He stared at it. He had boarded the plane on June 3, 2025. "Sarah?" he whispered, showing her the screen. Her eyes widened. "This can't be right." David pulled out his own phone, his fingers moving quickly. "Same here. 3 years. Gone." Sarah's son, Daniel, tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy," he said softly, "it's not wrong. We were just gone a long time." Sarah crouched down to face him. Daniel, what do you mean? The boy tilted his head like listening to something only he could hear. They told me in the dark. They said we were almost ready. Michael felt the hair on his neck stand up. Who told you? Daniel pointed toward the far wall. There was nothing there. Just the faint shimmering of the strange metal surface. David stepped forward and pressed his palm against it. The hum grew louder, vibrating. Under his skin. This isn't an airport, he muttered. It's something else. Before anyone could respond, the tall woman from the platform appeared in the doorway. It's time for your orientation, she said, her voice calm, almost kind. There's much to explain. You've been away longer than you think. Michael met David's eyes. Neither of them moved. Sarah clutched Daniel tighter. We're not going anywhere until you tell us what happened to us. The woman's expression didn't change. What happened, she said slowly, is why you are still alive. The orientation never happened. Instead, the tall woman led the group into a long, dim corridor. At the end, small identical rooms branched off to either side. She gestured to the doors. You'll rest here tonight, she said. Tomorrow we begin. Michael, Sarah, David, and Daniel ended up in rooms next to each other. The walls inside were the same pale, seamless material as the rest of the building. No windows. A single narrow bed. A metallic pitcher of water on a low table. Michael lay awake in the dark, his mind racing. The hum in the walls was constant, like a low heartbeat. Somewhere down the hall, he heard faint footsteps, too slow and deliberate to be random. He wasn't sure when he drifted off. A sharp knock at his door jolted him awake. Was David? Get up. Something's wrong. Michael followed him into the hall. Sarah was already there, clutching Daniel's hand, her face pale. It's Mark, David said grimly. Mark was a middle-aged man who had boarded 2 rows ahead of them on the plane. He'd been quiet during the landing, his expression unreadable. Now his room was empty. Completely empty. No bed. No table. Not even the walls looked the same. Where his doorway should have been was now a seamless stretch of pale surface, as though the room had never existed. Michael touched it. Cold, smooth and solid. This wasn't here last night, he said. Sarah's grip on her son tightened. Where did they take him? They didn't take him, David replied. They erased him. Michael shook his head. That's not possible. From farther down the corridor came the sound of footsteps. The tall woman appeared, her face as calm as ever. You should all be resting, she said. Where's Mark? Michael demanded. She didn't blink. There is no one here by that name. David stepped forward. We saw him. We spoke to him. Don't lie to us. The woman's eyes lingered on him for a moment, then moved to Daniel. The boy should eat. It's almost time. Sarah pulled Daniel behind her. You're not taking him anywhere. For the first time, the woman's expression hardened. The ones who belong here remain. The others fade. And then she turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hall until they vanished into silence. By morning, Mark's disappearance had become the unspoken shadow hanging over the group. No one mentioned his name, but everyone felt the hole he'd left, as if he had never been there, yet they couldn't shake the memory. Michael, Sarah, David, and Daniel met in the narrow hallway outside their rooms. The pale walls seemed brighter in the morning light, though the source of that light was unclear. There were no lamps, no windows, yet the entire corridor glowed faintly. We need answers, David said. We can't just wait until they decide one of us fades. Michael agreed. We need to find the pilot. Captain Henry Cole had been one of the last to leave the plane the night before. Michael hadn't seen him since, but David had overheard someone mention he was in the North Wing. Together, they set off down the humming corridors, keeping their pace casual to avoid drawing attention. The North Wing turned out to be a small, enclosed area at the far end of the building. There, in a bare room with a single table, sat Captain Cole. He looked older than Michael. Remembered, not just tired but worn down to the bone. His crisp uniform from the flight was now wrinkled, his tie hanging loose. You shouldn't be here, the captain said quietly as they entered. Michael stepped forward. We need to know what happened on that flight. How did we land? Without taking off. The captain's eyes darted toward the doorway, then back to them. You think I know? I don't even remember leaving the gate. David frowned. That's not possible. You were in the cockpit. Cole shook his head. I boarded the plane like you did. I took my seat in the cockpit, went through the checklist, then nothing. Just darkness. Next thing I knew we were landing. Here. Michael's chest tightened. So you're saying? I'm saying, Cole interrupted, that I've been flying for 30 years and whatever happened last night wasn't flight. It wasn't turbulence. It wasn't an emergency landing. It was something else. Sarah's voice was low but steady. Do you know where we are? Cole hesitated, then leaned in. I don't think we ever left. David stiffened. You mean we're still in Lagos? The captain shook his head slowly. No. I mean we never left that moment. The takeoff that didn't happen, we're still inside it. Michael felt the air in the room grow heavier. That doesn't make sense. Neither does this place, Cole said. And if you're smart, you'll stop asking questions out loud. They're listening. Before anyone could press him further, footsteps echoed in the hall. The tall woman appeared in the doorway, her face calm but her gaze sharp. Captain Cole, she said, it's time for you to prepare. For what? He asked. Her eyes flicked toward Michael, Sarah, and David. For your departure. Cole's shoulders slumped. He didn't resist as she led him out of the room. Michael exchanged a glance with David. Something told him departure didn't mean what it sounded like. They waited until the humming in the walls softened, the closest thing this place had to night. Most of the residents had retreated to their rooms, the corridors empty except for the faint glow that never truly faded. Michael and Sarah slipped out quietly, Daniel in tow. David stayed behind to distract anyone who might come looking for them. The tall woman had mentioned North Wing when speaking to the captain, but Michael remembered something else, the way her gaze always shifted whenever they passed the long, unmarked hallway branching off near the main platform. It was the only corridor that was roped off with a thin silver barrier. They reached it now. The rope wasn't locked, just draped across the entrance. Michael stepped over it. Sarah hesitated. What if this is where they take people? She whispered. Then we need to know, he replied. The corridor beyond was narrower, the hum in the walls louder. As they walked, the air grew warmer, heavier. The pale walls shimmered faintly like something was moving just beneath their surface. They turned a corner and stopped. Ahead of them was a massive, arched doorway with no door. Beyond it stretched a cavernous chamber, the walls lined with tall, coffin-like structures. Each one pulsed faintly, with light as if something inside was breathing. Sarah's hand tightened on Daniel's shoulder. What is this? Michael stepped closer to one of the structures. The surface was translucent and inside. His stomach flipped. Was a person. Motionless, eyes closed, floating upright in some kind of thick, clear fluid. He stumbled back. That's Mark. Sarah's breath caught. Oh my God. Daniel's small voice broke the silence. They're not gone. They're waiting. Michael turned to him. Waiting for what? Before the boy could answer, a sound like a sigh swept through the chamber, though it came from the walls, not the people inside the pods. The lights inside each structure flickered, then steadied. Footsteps echoed behind them. The tall woman stood in the archway, her expression calm but her eyes like steel. This area is not for you, she said. Michael took a step forward. What are you doing to them? Her lips curved faintly. Preserving them. Sarah's voice was sharp. Preserving them for what? The woman glanced at Daniel. For the moment they are needed. Before they could respond, she raised one hand, and the hum in the walls rose to a deafening pitch. The next thing Michael knew, the three of them were back in their rooms, their hearts racing as if they'd just woken from a nightmare. But Michael knew it hadn't been a dream, because when he closed his eyes, he could still see Mark's face, floating behind the glass. Eyes closed, waiting. Michael barely slept. The image of Mark, suspended in that glowing pod, wouldn't leave his mind. Sarah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the floor, Daniel curled against her side. By morning, David slipped into Michael's room, his expression tight. I think I found something. They followed him through a series of empty corridors to a small locked door near the east wing. The lock wasn't mechanical, it was a flat silver panel that hummed faintly. David pressed his palm against it and to their surprise it clicked open. Inside was a narrow archive room, shelves stacked with thin metallic tablets instead of paper files. The air was cool, almost sterile. David handed one of the tablets to Michael. Look at this. Michael swiped his finger across the smooth surface, and a passenger list appeared. Flight 728 Lagos to New York. Every name was there, including his own, Sarah's, David's, Mark's, even Captain Henry Cole. But under each name was a single word in bold, deceased. Sarah stepped closer. This can't be real. David pulled up another record, dated June 4, 2025, the day after their supposed flight. It was an official report from an international aviation board. The details were blunt. Flight 728 failed to reach cruising altitude and crashed shortly after takeoff. No. Survivors. Michael's throat went dry. They think we died. Sarah shook her head, her voice breaking. No. We're here. We're alive. Are we? David asked quietly. The question hung in the air. Michael flipped to another file, a manifest of cargo and equipment on board the flight. There was something odd at the bottom of the list. Protocol vessel, Series 9-17. Classified. Sarah frowned. What is that? Before anyone could speculate, the hum in the walls deepened, vibrating through the shelves. Michael looked toward the door. The tall woman was standing there, her face unreadable. You weren't meant to see this, she said. Michael's grip on the tablet tightened. What really happened to us? Her gaze swept over them slowly. You left, but not where you thought you were going. She stepped forward, her voice lowering. And the longer you stay here, the harder it will be to remember what you were before. David's jaw clenched. We remember enough to want out. The woman's lips curved faintly, not a smile but something colder. No one leaves. Not until the sky opens again. And then she was gone, the hum fading with her footsteps. The decision was made in whispers that night. We can't wait for them to decide we fade, David said. We find a way back to that runway. Get on whatever's out there and we leave. Sarah clutched Daniel's hand. If there's even a chance of getting out, we take it. Michael nodded. But we move fast. If they catch us, we won't get a second chance. They waited until the humming in the walls softened again, then slipped out of their rooms. The main platform, where they had first stepped off the plane, was empty now, bathed in that eerie copper light from the sky. Beyond it, in the distance, sat an aircraft. Its shape was familiar, but in the strange light, the metallic surface seemed darker, almost liquid. That's our ride, David whispered. They crossed the plane quickly, their footsteps muffled by the soft ground. As they got closer, Michael's stomach twisted. The tail number painted on the fuselage, 728. Sarah froze. That's the same plane we came in on. It can't be, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. They reached the boarding stairs. The door at the top was open, the cabin lights glowing faintly. Inside, the layout was identical. Same rows, same seats, same faint scent of jet fuel. And something sweeter, almost floral. But there was no crew. No other passengers. Just silence. Michael stepped into the cockpit. The controls were lit, but no one was there. The flight display showed no route, no destination. Only a single word blinking in red. Stand by. Sarah's voice came from behind him. Michael, look at this. She was holding something from one of the overhead bins, a small, worn travel bag. His travel bag. The one he boarded with days ago. He opened it. Inside were his things exactly as he'd packed them. Except his watch was still ticking, frozen at 10:42 p.m., June 3, 2025, the moment he boarded the plane in Lagos. This isn't another flight, Sarah said quietly. It's the same one. We never left it. The hum in the walls of the cabin grew louder, vibrating through the seats. David stepped back toward the door. We need to get out. The overhead compartments snapped shut all at once. The cabin lights dimmed to blood red. The engines roared, though the plane didn't move. A voice, calm, steady, and unmistakable, filled the cabin. Welcome back. Please take your seats. We'll be departing shortly. Michael's blood ran cold. It was Captain Cole's voice. But Captain Cole had already departed. The cabin doors slammed shut with a metallic thud that echoed through the empty plane. Michael, Sarah, and David exchanged desperate glances, the red light bathing their faces in a sickly glow. Sit down, the voice said again, calm, commanding, and impossible to disobey. They didn't move. The hum grew louder, shaking the air itself. The windows darkened until nothing was visible. Outside, as though the plane was suspended in an endless void. Then the voice spoke, slower now. You have been here since the moment the sky claimed you. Michael's pulse hammered. Who are you? There was a pause, then a sound like static breaking into a whisper. I am what waits. Between places. You entered me when you left the ground. David stepped toward the cockpit. If this is some kind of purgatory, let us go. The laugh that followed wasn't human. It rolled through the cabin like distant thunder. Go where? Back to the bodies you left behind? There is no leaving. You are mine until the sky opens again, and it will not open for you. Sarah clutched Daniel, who stared toward the cockpit with unsettling calm. They're not lying, the boy said softly. Michael turned to him. Daniel, how do you know that? I've been talking to them, Daniel replied. Since before we landed. They told me we didn't crash. We crossed. Crossed into what? Michael asked. Daniel's eyes lifted to the ceiling as though listening to something above them. Into where? They keep the ones they need. Before Michael could ask more, the plane shuddered. The windows flickered, showing flashes of the copper sky, then darkness, then the copper sky again, like the world outside was stuttering. Sarah's grip on Daniel tightened. What happens now? The voice returned, quiet and final. Now, you wait. Until you are called. The seats beneath them shifted, almost imperceptibly, pulling them downward. Michael tried to stand, but it was like gravity had doubled again, pinning him in place. His vision blurred. The hum in the walls growing so loud it drowned out his thoughts. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the tail number outside the window. 728, gleaming under a copper sky that didn't belong to Earth. When Michael opened his eyes, he was back in his seat, the cabin lights bright, the engines humming softly. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our descent. Please fasten your seatbelts. We'll be landing shortly. And just like the first time, Michael realized they had never taken off. Flight 728 never climbed, yet it keeps landing. Michael's eyes opened to the same announcement, the same aisle, the same impossible sky. Maybe the real terror isn't dying. It's being kept. If that lingered with you, subscribe to Emmy Stories for more interesting stories.